So what do you do when you have one camera, one lens, one photographer, one model, one opportunity? Well, of course, you take beautiful pictures. I'm Paul Wilkinson from masteringportraitphotography.com, and in this video we are going to be talking about how to make the best of the opportunity you have. And in this particular instance we're going to be talking mostly about composition, how to create interesting angles, interesting ways of laying out an image, and generally having a really good time creating some really cool stuff. So, when you're posing teenagers, don't get too involved for a million reasons. Apart from the yes, they smell. Mostly because if you try and overpose teenagers, it feels really stuffy and stagnant. It doesn't work so well. It's much nicer if you can to use their natural body language and get them to sit or stand and then see how you get on. So in this shot, I've placed Jake on some simple stairs and behind him is a bright yellow door. The door is going to act as a nice framing device within the picture, and then I'm going to photograph around him so you get a sense of space, but he will still be neatly framed inside that door. Look the other way up the street. That's good, thanks. Never miss the opportunity of taking a close-up. So the thing about shooting like this is because I always shoot in manual exposure, even though I went from taking a full frame of the whole area and then walked in to photograph Jake, I haven't had to change my exposure because the metering is already set onto what it is I need out of that image. We're just on our front doorstep here, so I haven't gone very far to create the pictures. I haven't gone looking for anything. I'm just looking at the light I have, which is a mix of sunlight and shadows, and then the locations are just bits of wall, shapes, gates, steps, whatever's here, and I'm just going to create as many interesting images as I can have it. So one of the joys of an angled wall like this, where there's a 90-degree angle in it, is almost always one half of that angle will be a different lightness to the other half, and I'm going to use that as my framing device. So if I draw your attention to, obviously, Alex, good-looking chap, this half of the wall is lighter than this half of the wall, and it makes for an interesting composition. So for a first shot, I've opted to step back and zoom in. That gives me a very flat perspective so that all of the verticals are pretty much vertical. I'm not going to get an awful lot of perspective out of it, but that works quite well for this kind of setup where I've trying to break it into two complete frames, two complete segments of the image, and it worked quite nicely from here. And now what I can do, using exactly the same bit of wall, the same model, and it's such a simple thing to do because I'm shooting in manual, haven't had to change my exposure. All I've done is change my angle to create a very different looking image. If I'm shooting portraits on location, I'll shoot like this, so I've got my nice big scenic, but then I'll walk in and I'll get a tight crop as well. And I've gained myself a couple of very quick portraits in portrait mode, and I'm going to do a couple of wides. Simple as you like, nice, easy, cool portraits. So, curbstones, brick lines, all of these can be used to lead the eyes into a subject. This is how you create leading lines. All you're actually doing is using the effects of a diminishing perspective from the fact your subject is further away and all of the lines appear to converge towards them. So I've got a couple of options on this. I can pull away and come round and then the bricks will sit more behind Alex, or I can come in really tight to the curb and shoot all the way along it and see if I can get the perspective to draw straight into him, and we'll do both. So if I come out here, obviously if you're working on a road, try not to get run over. The thing is, you've got to be careful to make sure there's nothing protruding into Alex's head. That's better. It's one shot. See how close I can get the camera into here. So look up at me. There you go. 3 shots out of 1 location. I've placed Jake against the wall, and all I'm going to do is use the space of the wall and the shadow on the wall from the sunshine to maybe create something that's just a little bit different. That's lovely. Hold that, Jake, so you don't move. And then look that way, Jakes. That's it. I've taken very quickly just a couple of shots. So I've used the shadow along the wall, just because it's a nice, interesting angle. And then I framed it nice and big so that it gives a sense of just space, I suppose. The negative space is huge compared to the portrait, but this is the kind of portrait, if you want your clients to buy big pictures, quite often you'll find more success with having the person, the subject of the image, smaller and having a big amount of space around them. So if you're looking for a composition that will sell well onto a big wall, have a look at creating the person small and the expansive space big, because they look fantastic when they're blown up large, just so you know. Sometimes you just see stuff and think it might be interesting. Who knows? So strictly speaking, this isn't about composition. However, if you look at this wall, you can't, if the sun just comes back out from behind that cloud, what you might see is just on the lumps in the plaster, the sun is lighting it. That means the sun, the line of the sun, is running right along the wall. So if you put someone against it, because they're obviously sticking out from the wall, they're going to be lit, whereas the wall is just in the shade. So you have a very interesting opportunity. It only happens once a day on each wall. Some walls not at all, but in this wall once a day, where you can just see that line of light. Look that way, Alex. It's just something different, how to use light, how to observe light. And although this isn't strictly about composition, it's a very interesting way to create a portrait. As I said at the beginning of this video, when you're using one lens, you have to use what you have. It's a zoom lens, so it's fairly versatile. I don't have a wide angle on here. So my preferred shooting distance is usually around about this. But what I'm trying to do here is use the scene as it is to somehow focus in on my subject, which is Jake, and where he's positioned. But in this scene, I've also got cobbles, I've got an old rustic wall, which means if I want to, I can use that as some of the messaging in the image, just to give it a little bit of romance, really, and a little bit of texture. When I'm shooting, I'll shoot quite low. If I shoot low here, I'm getting a little bit too much of the buildings in the background, so I'm having to hold my height a bit to ensure the composition stays as much as possible, just the walls and the cobbled floor. And it makes for a really interesting image. So if I shoot that, stay with me for a minute, Jake, see? That gives a really nice shape and texture to the image. Look at that way, Jake, see? Further, 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 that's it. Very simple shot. Only this time I've used the wall to mask off the background. So I've got a very elegant, simple, almost a studio shot. The reason why I'm asking Jake, and I asked Alex as well, to move their face position around is because if you look at where Jake is at the moment, the sunshine is that way. So I want his face to be properly lit. And if I have him looking that way, the sun's scraping around his face, is not lighting him well at all. If I have him look away, then the sun lights his face properly and the shot is going to be all the better for it. You right there, Alex? Yeah. Just working it. Actually, do you know what? There's a shot there. Jake, you're done for a second. So sometimes you just look around and there's a shot. One of the things about Hadnam is we have all of these old buildings and lime-washed walls and these really interesting roof tiles that almost look Mediterranean. So I've turned round, Alex, who's just sitting there minding his own business, he's sat in quite a nice light and there's a little bit of a shot there. It's not perfect, but sometimes it's just a nice shot. And if I include the roofs in it, doesn't that look like a scene in Tuscany? Okay, hold that, Alex. So all I've seen here is an interesting opportunity to use leading lines and a little bit of framing at the end to draw your eye in, and just a simple, beautiful picture. Not perfect, but like I said, one camera, one lens, one subject. What are you going to do? I do like that though. I just don't want so much sky in it. I don't seem to be able to get rid of the sky. So all I'm trying to do, as always, is find a nice patch of light. Start with a light, always start with a light, and then I'll work the scene around a nice patch of light. If the light's rubbish, unless there's something truly newsworthy or frankly unmissable about your moment, it's not going to be a great shot. But if you've got beautiful light, on the whole, you're going to have a beautiful shot. So I've just asked Alex to stand there. I've done a quick light test to make sure I've got everything right. So I'm going to pose both the lads together. Okay, so all I've done, check my exposure, nice light. Jake, see, if you're photographing a couple of people, more than one, by definition, unless there's a meaning for having separation between them, generally you want them quite close, either touching or overlapping, so that in the picture, at least in my opinion, it feels like one consolidated part of the image, not two separate spikes. Now, that's not always how you do it, but normally for a pairing or a trio, I'll try and make that the shape. So the reason I'm edging along a wall is just I'm trying to find a position where the two of them are totally enclosed with this wall, so I don't have any of this background that you're seeing down there. There you are, simple as that. Needs a little bit of clean up, but we're getting there. Nice starting point. Jake, I want you to look that way, straight to that wall, that's it. So there you go, very simple, very fashiony teenage shot. Easy as you like. That's it. And look that way, as you just did. Go on further. So I've got a nice bit of wall using negative space. So in this particular instance, the cropping or staging or framing device I'm using, there's a lot of space actually. Always the same, as you're walking along, you see the shot. It's a great idea, and I say this to photographers a lot. If you're ever worried about creating a whole series of images and you have to go and do a shoot, particularly when you're beginning, one of the greatest things you can do is just go for a walk with your client. You'd be surprised how many scenes you see, how many little moments, and this is one of those scenes. Just as we're walking back, I've noticed that the lime wash on the wall is really bright and lovely, and there's a window in it which might act as an interesting framing device. So all I've done, I've put Alex against it, I've come across a little bit. Shot number one. And then also, because there's all of this yellow, now I'm guessing, no, I'm not going to try and guess what that is. Jasmine. I bet it's jasmine. All of you botanists out there, I'm really sorry, I know nothing about plants. But it's bright yellow. And if you use it as a framing device, you can get some quite interesting pictures. Look, how pretty is that? Just in case you're curious, the fact that Alex's face looked like it was beautifully lit is because the sun is striking that white wall there. So you get a big white reflector, and it's actually Alex is being lit by essentially perfect white light from a wall on the other side of the alleyway. Easy. Okay, so walk towards me. Keep one behind the other. Alex, look this way. Thank you. If ever you want to create movement in an image and you're worried about doing it, you just get someone to walk towards the camera. So I've set it to continuous focus. I've actually set it onto motor wind on the shutter, which I don't really need to do, but I like it that way. And as they walk towards me, I've just taken some shots. And while they might not be perfect, they'll have movement and character about them that's harder to do when you just have someone stood or sat in front of you. Just another way of doing it. I've sent the boys back to go and change into something a little more suitable. Haha, forgive the pun. And we're now going to take a few pictures where we're going to have a much more classic look to it. Man in a suit, or teenager in a suit in this case, and see what we can get. Although this video is ostensibly about composition, of course composition has a purpose. So although we think about it in terms of grids or spirals or leading lines or whatever it might be, the job of the composition is twofold. The first is for the image to be pleasing, balance. Somehow the image feels like it's what you intended. Now that might be that you've deliberately place the subject way off on an edge so that it adds tension to the image. Other times it might be you've placed it traditionally on the thirds, maybe a bullseye composition in the middle, so the image has a balance and it just feels aesthetically relaxing. The second role of composition, and this is more important in some ways, is for you to lead the viewer to what it was you wanted them to see. Now in the case of a portrait, that's almost always a face. And so in these images, I'm actually using light and an out of focus background to do precisely that job. So what we're trying to do here is I've placed Alex into a patch of sunlight. Now, to get this, I noticed the sunlight on the floor, which is a big pool of light that's coming through the trees. So if I put Alex in there, in theory, the background's going to be significantly darker. So let's take a shot and have a look. Let me just check. You blinked. Let me just check the histogram. It's really important if you're working with someone in direct sunlight that you check your histogram frequently, because you'll find as the sun levels go up and down with clouds, you'll spike out of the top and you'll have blown highlights, particularly if someone's wearing a white shirt. Check your histogram. That's it. Perfect shot. Right, Jake's going to be in this as well. So Alex, actually, you know, you're fine. There's quite a lot of headroom there. Jake, come and stand here. Look further that way, Jake. See, that's it. That's good. Thank you. There we go. It's as simple as that. So in this video, I've done what I love to do, possibly more than anything else on the planet. Taken a single camera, a single lens, a location that's all within a few hundred yards of our own studio, and just taken some pictures that I really love. In this instance, illustrating primarily composition, how to use shape and form and light to draw your attention or the viewer's attention to the bit of the image you want. If you've enjoyed this, why don't you grab a camera, go and do the same kind of thing. Don't travel far, just 100 yards, 200 yards from your home or your studio, and see what you can create. All you need is some light, someone to photograph, and just a little bit of imagination. I'm Paul Wilkinson from masteringportraitphotography.com, and if you've enjoyed this video, and I really hope you have, why don't you hop across to our website and subscribe, and who knows, maybe you'll become part of our ever-growing community. Until then, take care. Oh, look at, now we've got bloody helicopter. I'm going to update what I said about the thing about working with teenagers. I'm going to update that to don't work with teenagers. The one on the left, that's where the light is.
Your left or my left?
We're facing the same way.